The scarlet curtains shimmered, parting with a theatrical flourish as the familiar, booming voice of Guillermo announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Samuel L. Jackson." The studio audience at Jimmy Kimmel Live erupted into a cacophony of cheers, applause, and whistles that seemed to shake the very rafters of the theater. A palpable wave of excitement pulsed through the room as Samuel L. Jackson, dapper in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a subtly patterned silk tie that caught the studio lights, and his signature cap, strode onto the stage with an air of effortless cool. His grin, a blend of warmth and mischief that could disarm a hostile alien, was infectious as he greeted the band with a nod, high-fived a few lucky front-row fans with a hearty slap, and finally settled into the plush guest chair opposite a beaming Jimmy Kimmel. "Sam, my man," Jimmy exclaimed, leaning forward with genuine enthusiasm. "It is always a pleasure, always a privilege to have you here. You're practically family at this point. How are you doing tonight, truly?" "Jimmy, you know I'm doing well," Samuel drawled, his voice a rich, resonant bass that vibrated not just through the studio sound system but seemed to hum in the very air. "Any night I get to sit down with you and not have to decode cryptic messages from Nick Fury about a global catastrophe is a good night, indeed." Before we continue, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe for more content like this. Also, don't forget to turn the bell on so you don't miss a single video in the channel. The audience roared with laughter, a familiar camaraderie instantly established between the legendary actor and the late-night host. The first segment flowed as smoothly as aged bourbon, a masterclass in celebrity interviews. They touched upon Samuel's latest blockbuster, Cosmic Crucible, an intergalactic legal drama where he played a grizzled alien prosecutor named Xylos, known for his relentless cross-examinations and surprisingly tender moments. Clips from the film played on the large monitor, showcasing dazzling special effects and Samuel's commanding presence. He shared vivid anecdotes from the set, the unforeseen challenges of acting opposite a CGI sentient nebula that kept changing its emotional state, the surprisingly good craft services even on a spaceship simulation where the atmosphere was controlled, and the sheer joy of bringing such a complex, morally ambiguous character to life. The audience hung on every word, captivated by his charisma and effortless storytelling, feeling privileged to be in the presence of such an icon. So, Cosmic Crucible is hitting theaters nationwide next week, and honestly, Sam, it looks absolutely phenomenal, Jimmy said, flipping through his well-worn cue cards, a professional glint in his eye. "Another absolute home run for you, another iconic role in the bag. But, you know, we love having you here so much, and you're such a living legend, that we thought, just for tonight, we'd spice things up a little. Do something a bit out of the ordinary." Samuel raised an eyebrow, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a hint of playful apprehension, in his eyes. He leaned back slightly, a subtle shift in his posture. "Oh, spice. You talking about the extra hot sauce you put on those fish tacos you tricked me into eating last time, Jimmy? Because I'm still feeling the burn from that experience, if I'm being honest." He fanned himself jokingly, eliciting more chuckles. Jimmy chuckled, a mischievous glint dancing in his eyes. No, nothing that fiery, although if anyone in this room could handle it without breaking a sweat, it'd be you, Sam. No, this is, well, it's something I've been seeing a lot of lately on the internet, and it got me thinking. You have one of the most distinctive, powerful, and let's face it, intimidating voices in Hollywood. It's a voice that demands attention, a voice that makes you sit up straight and pay attention, whether you're being told to hold on to your butt or you're listening to a profound monologue. Samuel nodded slowly, a slight, knowing smile playing on his lips. He'd heard variations of this compliment, this observation, countless times throughout his illustrious career. His voice was his trademark, his instrument, his unique signature. "But," Jimmy continued, his eyes twinkling with an almost childish glee, building up to his reveal, what if that voice was used for something completely different? Something utterly unexpected." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the suspense hang in the air, glancing at the audience, who were now leaning forward in their seats, a low hum of anticipation spreading through the room like wildfire. "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are proud to present for your viewing pleasure, Samuel L. Jackson, the ASMR Experience." The very moment Jimmy uttered the words, the audience burst into a gale of laughter. Not just polite chuckles or polite titters, but genuine, unrestrained guffaws that echoed off the studio walls. The concept of Samuel L. Jackson, the living embodiment of cinematic intensity and vocal power, suddenly engaging in autonomous sensory meridian response, quiet whispers, gentle tapping, soft rustling sounds, all designed to induce a calming, tingling sensation, was inherently ludicrous, a comedic goldmine for any late-night talk show. The studio lights dimmed slightly, creating a more intimate, almost surreal atmosphere, and a large monitor behind Jimmy and Samuel lit up, displaying a serene, pastel-colored graphic with the segment title in a soft, flowing, almost ethereal script. The absurdity of it all was palpable. Samuel's iconic grin, however, which had been so readily on display just moments before, had vanished entirely. His expression, which had been so jovial and open, now settled into an unreadable mask, a deep, unsettling stillness. His eyes, usually so animated and expressive, now held a stillness that bordered on glacial, reflecting an inner world that had suddenly become very quiet. He sat perfectly still, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed directly on Jimmy, not with anger or even irritation, but with an almost profound disappointment, a deep sense of being utterly misunderstood. It was a look that conveyed more than any words could. Jimmy, riding the boisterous wave of audience laughter, seemed utterly oblivious to the subtle, yet seismic, shift in Samuel's demeanor. He was still caught up in the comedic potential of his brilliant idea. "Okay, Sam, don't look at me like that," he chirped, still attempting to inject levity into the segment. "This is going to be hilarious. It's a comedic bit. We've got a few everyday objects here, and we're just going to ask you to read some mundane things, or make some everyday sounds, but in an ASMR voice. You know, whispery, calming, tingly for the audience. We even got the special microphone for you." He reached under his desk with a flourish and pulled out a small, fluffy microphone, the kind specifically designed for ASMR videos, covered in a large furry windsock that made it resemble a whimsical, oversized creature. He placed it carefully, almost reverently, on the polished table between them, directly in front of Samuel. Samuel watched his every movement, his jaw subtly clenching, a muscle twitching almost imperceptibly in his cheek. He said nothing, his silence more potent, more impactful, than any shouted expletive or sharp retort could have been. The laughter of the audience, which had started so heartily and boisterously, began to taper off, dying down to nervous titters, then replaced by a growing ripple of palpable awkwardness. A few people in the front row exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing the unexpected, profound shift in the atmosphere. The comedic energy that had filled the room moments before was rapidly draining away, replaced by a tangible, almost suffocating tension. The air felt heavy. "All right, first up," Jimmy chirped again, desperately clinging to the script, still attempting to inject some semblance of his intended light-heartedness into the segment. He held up a crisp, new receipt from a local grocery store, its thermal paper still smooth and uncreased. Can you read this receipt, line by line, for us, for the millions watching at home, in your softest, most soothing whisper, to truly give them the ASMR experience?" The silence that followed was deafening, amplified by the prior burst of laughter. It was the kind of silence that made you acutely aware of your own breathing. Samuel L. Jackson remained motionless, his eyes boring into Jimmy's, a silent question hanging in the charged air, heavier than any spoken word. "Are you truly serious, Jimmy? Is this what you believe my purpose is?" Jimmy's bright smile faltered, like a light bulb dimming. He finally registered, with a jolt, the depth of Samuel's unamusement, the quiet dignity of his offense. He saw the shift in his friend's eyes, the set of his jaw. "Sam, just a little whisper, for the folks at home? We thought it would be funny, you know, a juxtaposition, a comedic twist, something unexpected." His voice trailed off, realizing the inadequacy of his explanation. Samuel finally spoke, his voice not the booming whisper Jimmy had requested, but still low, controlled, and cutting through the remaining nervous chuckles like a precisely aimed laser. There was no anger in it, but a steely conviction. "Funny. Jimmy, you honestly think it's funny to take a voice that has spent a lifetime honing its craft, a voice that has delivered the profound words of Nobel laureates, of Pulitzer Prize winners, of social justice advocates, of revolutionaries and dreamers, and reduce it to a grocery list whispered into a fluffy microphone for transient tingles?" The studio went utterly silent. You could literally hear a pin drop, the collective breath of the audience held in suspension. The crew members behind the cameras froze. The audience, which had moments ago been roaring with laughter at the perceived absurdity, now sat utterly captivated, perhaps a little chastened, even humbled. Jimmy's face, which had been beaming with late-night show enthusiasm, now held a genuine look of shock, mild embarrassment, and burgeoning understanding. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, unsure how to articulate a fitting reply to this unexpected, profound turn in the interview. He finally realized he had miscalculated, profoundly. Samuel leaned forward, slowly, deliberately, his gaze sweeping across the stunned and now utterly silent audience, then settling back with unwavering intensity on Jimmy. His voice, though still calm and measured, was now imbued with an intensity that held everyone in its grip, an intensity far more powerful and commanding than any mere volume could convey. It was a voice of conviction, of deep, deeply held principles. "My voice, Jimmy," he began, his words deliberate, each one weighted with decades of experience and purpose, "is not merely a sound-making apparatus. It is a conduit. It is a tool. It is a weapon. It is, above all, a vessel for meaning. For over 50 years, I have used this voice to bring characters to life, to convey emotions from the deepest despair to the most triumphant joy, to embody the entire spectrum of human experience. I have lent it to stories that have moved millions, that have challenged perceptions, that have sparked conversations, that have reflected the human condition in all its messy, glorious, and sometimes brutal complexity." He gestured subtly with one hand, a controlled, powerful movement that drew the eye without being flamboyant. Think of the profound, transformative power of the spoken word. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, his voice echoing across a fractured nation, igniting a movement for civil rights that changed the course of history. Think of the solemn, weighty pronouncements of a judge delivering justice, or the passionate, fiery plea of an advocate fighting for the voiceless, for those marginalized by society. Think of the quiet, comforting reassurance a parent gives a frightened child in the dead of night, or the booming, galvanizing declaration of a general rallying his troops before a decisive battle, inspiring them to courage. He paused again, letting the sheer weight and significance of his words settle into the stunned silence of the studio. "My craft, Jimmy, is about using this vessel, this voice, to build worlds, to embody universal truths, to create indelible moments that resonate deeply and reverberate long after the credits roll on a film. It's about bringing the written word to vibrant, undeniable life, transforming ink on a page into living, breathing reality. It's about conviction. It's about intent. It's about telling stories that don't just entertain, but illuminate, provoke, and stir the soul. It's about giving voice to the human spirit." His eyes softened slightly, a flicker of genuine regret for Jimmy's misstep, but the underlying intensity remained, unwavering. "And ASMR. With all due respect to those who genuinely find solace and comfort in it, and I don't doubt its benefits for some, it is, in its very essence, the absence of meaning, the deliberate removal of narrative. It's about the sound itself, stripped of context, divorced from any narrative arc, reduced to a mere physiological sensation. It's the absolute antithesis of what I, and countless other actors, poets, orators, and storytellers like me, have dedicated our entire lives to achieve with the profound instrument that is our voice." He picked up the fluffy ASMR microphone once more, turning it over in his large hand with a curious, almost academic interest, examining it as if it were an artifact from an alien world. "To suggest that my voice, a voice that has been forged in the crucible of countless performances, honed through decades of tireless work, a voice brimming with fire and purpose, should be used to whisper about paper towels and cereal box ingredients for fleeting entertainment is not juxtaposition, Jimmy. It's not a clever comedic premise. It's a profound misunderstanding of the power of communication, of the very art form I have poured my entire being into. It's a dismissal of the craft." He placed the microphone back on the table, carefully, almost reverently, as if handling a delicate, fragile object. "My voice, Jimmy, is not a gimmick. It is not a party trick to be trotted out for cheap laughs. It is the sacred instrument through which I speak my truth, and the truth of the countless characters I have been privileged to embody. It is the culmination of years of listening, of observing, of feeling, and of daring to articulate what needs to be said, sometimes loudly, with thunderous impact, sometimes quietly, with a piercing subtlety, but always with absolute purpose, with conviction, and with the full weight of the story behind it." The studio was now utterly still, a silence that was not uncomfortable, but profoundly reverent, filled with the echo of his powerful words. The audience, which had initially laughed at the absurdity of the premise, was now completely mesmerized, awestruck by the unexpected depth and gravitas of the moment. They had come for entertainment, for a celebrity anecdote, and instead, They were receiving a profound, unexpected lecture on the artistry, the responsibility, and the sheer gravitas of the spoken word from a true master. It was a moment of intellectual and artistic revelation. Jimmy Kimmel, usually so quick-witted and adept at steering conversations, was visibly chastened, his earlier jovial demeanor replaced by a look of genuine respect and a newfound understanding etched on his face. He swallowed hard, cleared his throat, and looked at Samuel L. Jackson with new eyes, seeing not just the actor, but the artist and the thinker. "Sam," he said, his voice softer than usual, tinged with a sincerity that resonated throughout the room, I honestly never thought of it that way. You're absolutely right. That was incredibly insightful. And I genuinely apologize. My intention was just to be funny, to create a light-hearted moment, but you've shown us all something far more important and profound tonight. You've given us a masterclass." A wave of applause, hesitant at first as the audience processed the profound shift, then thunderous and utterly heartfelt, swept through the studio. It wasn't the laughter-infused applause of a typical comedy segment, but the deep, appreciative roar of an audience that had just witnessed a moment of unexpected brilliance, a moment where entertainment transcended into enlightenment, where a perceived misstep became a powerful teaching moment. Samuel L. Jackson had not just deflected a joke, he had dismantled it, elevating the entire conversation with intelligence, passion, and an unwavering commitment to his craft and the power of language. He had surprised everyone, not with an outburst or a comedic punchline, but with the quiet, undeniable power of his intellect and the profound respect he held for the very voice they had sought to trivialize. The segment ended not with a laugh, but with a prolonged, sincere standing ovation, leaving everyone in the room utterly convinced that Samuel L. Jackson was not just a movie star, but a genuine intellectual force, a profound artist, and a captivating orator whose voice truly held boundless purpose.